All right, so hey everybody, first off, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, so in my speech today, I'm going to be talking about immigration and 3 topics of immigration. So I'm going to be talking about immigration from the 1960s to today, immigration in the 1980s and 90s, and immigration from after 9/11. So let's get right into it. So immigration in the 1960s. So let's throw back to that. So in 1965, the Immigration and Naturalization Act was passed. And basically what this act does is it abolishes an earlier quota system based on national origin and establishes a new immigration policy based on bringing immigrant families together and attracting skilled laborers into the U.S. Also, this law increases the amount of immigrants allowed into the U.S. per year, increasing from 160,000 immigrants per year to 290,000 immigrants per year, which is an amazing increase. This law caused an explosion of Hispanics to flood the country, with 3 million Hispanics then, but after the law, up till now, 53 million Hispanics are in the country as of right now, and these Hispanics are thriving economically. And so the country which has the highest number of immigrants coming to the U.S. since this law was enacted is Mexico, with 4.3 million immigrants coming to the U.S. And second was the Philippines, with 1.3 million immigrants coming to the U.S. Now, all of this puts the U.S. on track for the minority to soon outweigh the majority by 2044, which while it's like 20 years away, or like 30 years away, it's still achievable like in the next 30 years, which is it's a lot. It's pretty crazy. And basically what this means is like non-whites will soon outnumber whites, which just shows that America is a land of immigrants. And now, before I move on to my next topic, let me ask you all a question. So does anybody know why Italian immigrants are named Tony?
No.
Does anybody know?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so they're named Tony because when they got on the boat to America, they had 2 NY stamped on their hand. Tony, haha.
Cool.
Alright, so moving on to my next topic, immigration in the 1980s. Now, in the 80s, we saw the Congress enact the Immigration Reform and Control Act in 1986. Now, what this act does is 3 main things. First off, it makes it illegal for employers to hire illegal immigrants. And it creates the first ever time in U.S. history that penalties will be given to the employer if they are found to have knowingly hired a U.S. illegal immigrant. And eventually these penalties, at first it will be a fine, but if it keeps on repeating, criminal penalties will ensue, and this person does have a chance of going to jail. And this is not good, and this form of penalties, this new system, really discouraged people from hiring illegal immigrants in the first place. And moving on to the second big change this law had. So the second big change was increased border control against illegal immigrants. And basically, this law was because the public clamored for a change in the law because they were being pushed out of their jobs. They felt like it was an unspoken thing back then, and a lot of people can testify against it today because they give interviews. And basically, people felt like they're being pushed out of their jobs because there was just too much competition from immigrants coming into the country. And so they really wanted it to be clamped down, the illegal immigration to be clamped down upon. And so they really did increase border control security, which really helps make the public opinion come in favor of Congress on this issue. However, really big investments didn't occur on this issue until the mid-1990s, nearly a decade later, which means that this part of the law was solely created mostly to reassure the people and to make them, just to calm them down a little bit. And so the third part of the law is a pretty big law. It's the legalization or amnesty of immigrants who can prove they've been in the U.S. for 5 or more years, which is a really big thing because before illegal immigrants were afraid to come forward that they're illegal immigrants. as they had a chance of being deported, but now they have a chance of becoming legal immigrants in the US, which is a very good thing. And there was also a separate companion program for agricultural farmers, and the criteria was a little bit easier, and in total, these programs helped 2.7 million immigrants become legal through this entire process. So moving on to the 1990s. So the 1990s, once again, people felt like they were being pushed out of their jobs, so they clamored for some change, and Congress did respond to this, and they passed the Legal Immigrant Responsibility and Immigrant Act. So basically what this act does is, this is when the real investments in border security really start happening, and it really does start to change the public's opinion for good of illegal immigrants. And this act really did help quell the public's fears of illegal immigrants coming to the country. Now moving on to 9/11, probably the biggest change in immigrant policy possible. So I'm sure we all know what 9/11 is. It's a horrible terrorist event, and this event caused the government to respond with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, which took over the functions of 26 federal agencies by the previous Immigration and Naturalization Service. 26 federal agencies were merged into 3 big federal agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, the biggest change in immigration history in the US. And so these 3 federal agencies were pretty big. So the first federal agency was the CPB, so the Customs and Protection Border. So the Customs and Border Protection. So basically what this is it's the jurisdiction of all immigrants that come in through ports, and all goods that coming through ports. And it's this agency, this part of the Department of Homeland Security, has the ability to deport anything that they deem harmful to the United States that comes in through ports. And so the second big agency is the Immigrant and Customs Enforcement. Now this Immigrant and Customs Enforcement, or the ICE, resides over employees' requirements for immigrants coming into the United States. And another thing it resides over is detention centers for illegal immigrants. And the third thing that it resides over is deportations for all immigrants that are deemed harmful to the country that are not coming in through ports. As I previously said, illegal immigrants that come in through ports are deported through the previous agency that I've just said. So this second agency did deport a lot of immigrants, so the third agency that was part of the Department of Homeland Security was the USCIS, or the United States Citizenship Immigrant Service. And this is probably the biggest agency. It resides over giving people citizenship, and it really just is meant to stop harmful people coming to the US from becoming permanent residents of the US, which is a very good thing. And also it resides over giving asylum and things like that to refugees from other countries, and which is also a pretty big thing. And this agency has come under play recently in like the past 7 years or like 10 years or so, as so many refugees are going to different countries, but also a lot of refugees want to come into the US. And so this agency is responsible for all these refugees that want to come into the US. So what I talked about in my speech was 3 things: immigration in the 1960s to today, immigration in the 1980s and 90s, and immigration and how it changed from after 9/11. So overall, all in all, immigration did not change, mostly from the laws in 1965 to today. But however, the changes that did occur were added on laws. Almost no laws were taken out in the span from 1965 to today, but laws were added on. And so this really helped change the environment of the immigrants coming to the US. and a lot of immigrants would not be in the US today, as we know. So, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Romir Jain, and thank you.
Cool, awesome.